I watched the Ukraine war very closely, and all the destruction of basically all the country, they're reporting 100,000 soldiers killed, wounded, and needless war. I think every country should be free to follow their own way.
So as Canada reflects on past battles this Remembrance Day, the Canadian military continues to support Ukraine in its battle against Russia. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky this week just ahead of the G20 summit. And Zelensky tweeted out his thanks for Canada's large-scale defense support for Ukraine and continued, quote, "We discussed the possibilities of its expansion. I count on Canada's support for Ukrainian initiatives in the G20 and the UN." Anita Anand is the Minister of National Defense. Minister, this is a day where we often reflect on the conflicts of the past, but I'd like to speak to you about the big conflict of the day, because the Prime Minister and President Zelensky spoke this week, and according to the leader of Ukraine, they discussed widening military support potentially. So I'm wondering, should Ukraine expect more military aid from Canada in the near future?
Well, it's an important question, David, for sure, especially on Remembrance Day. I will say that Canada has committed $600 million of military aid thus far, ranging from cameras for drones, armored vehicles, M777s, ammunition for M777s, and additional artillery. And we will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine in the short and the long term in protection of its sovereignty and stability. And it's not just military aid that we are assisting Ukraine with. Of course, it is also training. We have trained 33,000 Ukrainian soldiers since 2015 under Operation Unifier, and we're continuing that training in England, as well as training Ukrainian engineers in Poland. And then finally, we are transporting military aid to Ukraine on behalf of our allies with 3 Hercules aircraft operating out of Prestwick, Scotland. And so I'd say, David, our effort is multifaceted, and we will continue to be there for Ukraine and in support of the international rules-based order that has kept us safe since the end of the Second World War.
I wonder, though, Minister, when you look at the dynamic on the battlefield in Ukraine right now, and they seem to be taking a lot of ground in this latest counteroffensive against Russia, most notably now in Kherson, in that city. Given that success, given that what's happening, does that cause you and your allies to look at accelerating things and moving the fast to sort of help them continue this push to drive Russia out of their territory?
I meet regularly with my defense minister counterparts from across NATO and beyond as part of the defense ministers contact group organized by Secretary Lloyd Austin of the United States. And our feeling among defense ministers is that we need to keep going, and we need to continue to be united, and we need to continue to put aid on the table for Ukraine. And so when we meet, David, we actually isolate what every country is doing. Ukraine is at the table with Minister Resnikov, and he highlights what he needs, and we fill the holes together so that we can make sure that Ukraine has the military aid and equipment it needs in the short and the long term. And we, in fact, have one of those meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks where we will again re-examine how we can help Ukraine. And apart from all of that military equipment that I outlined earlier, I want to say that Canada is supplying 500,000 articles of winter clothing to the Ukrainian armed forces because we know that winter is coming. Canada has expertise in winter clothing, and we will make sure we're there with military equipment, as well as training, as well as transporting aid, as well as winter clothing.
Yep, and of course there's also the sovereign bonds and financial support for the operations of the government, the saving bonds you've launched, all of this, like the total package. But I wonder, like this meeting of the other defense ministers that you're talking about, defense procurement, it takes a while, right? And it's tough to get this, and everybody's trying to buy the equipment. I just wonder, can it be nimble enough to respond to the dynamic as it accelerates on the battlefield if they need that rapid reinforcement of gear? Because right now they seem to have Russia on the run. I mean, do you have the ability to go fast to get at something to them to help them with that effort?
I have been meeting with the defense industry folks, David, with this very point in mind. We need to be nimble. We need to ramp up. And that's exactly what we have seen in terms of supplying cameras for drones. There's a company, L3 Harris, operating out of Hamilton, Ontario, and they revamped their business so that they could supply drones to drone cameras to Ukraine in very short order. We had that contract done in days. And that's exactly the model that we are using with defense suppliers moving forward. And David, you saw in the COVID-19 pandemic, when I was leading the procurement effort, we were able to turn around procurement contracts for PPE and vaccines and rapid tests very quickly. And that's exactly the model that I'm bringing to defense with my Deputy Minister, Bill Matthews.
I wonder, Minister, if you look at what's happening in the United States right now, a big supplier of military and financial aid to President Zelensky and his country, but it looks like in the midterm elections, the Republicans may gain control of the House of Representatives. And some of the congressional leadership, Kevin McCarthy, for example, has suggested the possibility of tightening the purse strings on U.S. aid to Ukraine. I wonder what concerns you would have over that, and how well Canada and NATO allies can effectively fund Ukraine's defense against Russia if the United States posture pulls back at all.
Well, to begin, my sense is that the United States will continue to be there in the short and the long term as well. I speak with Secretary Austin frequently, and that is certainly the sense that I am receiving. And Secretary Blinken was also in Canada and reiterated the commitment of the United States to the effort in supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and stability and security. I will say that this is a moment, especially on Remembrance Day, where we have to take note that it's not only Ukraine's sovereignty and democracy that is at issue. It is also the international rules-based order under the Bretton Woods Agreement that has kept us all safe since the end of the Second World War. And when I am traveling across this country, David, I see Ukrainian flags flying from vehicles and on people's porches, and it is quite clear to me that Canadians themselves see the importance of our national commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and stability by providing and assisting them in whatever way we can.
I'd like to touch on one final point, if I could, and it's a big one, and it's military culture. And the transformation there that you're seeking to do is probably the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest you face as Defense Minister. I'm wondering, a year from now, Remembrance Day of 2023, where do you hope to be on that cultural transformation you're trying to achieve in the military? And where do you hope to be on the recruitment challenges that are really a result of those cultural challenges that exist right now?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, David, because it has been about a year since I've been appointed as Defense Minister, and my top priority continues to be to build a Canadian Armed Forces where everyone feels safe, protected, and respected, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, culture, or religion. And we continue to make progress in this area. For example, I accepted the interim recommendation of Madame Arbour to move cases from the military to the civilian justice system. I've appointed an external monitor to oversee the implementation of the Arbour recommendations, and we continue to build up the Sexual Misconduct Response Center to make sure that the process for elevating general and flag officers remains robust, and to make sure that cadets receive the training that they need when it comes to diversity and inclusion and other important topics. And so when I look down the road a year from now, David, we need to continue moving quickly on the recommendations of Madame Arbour, and I will be coming back to Parliament this fall to provide an update on the status of the implementation of the Arbour recommendations as Madame Arbour requested in her final report. Suffice it to say, this is the top priority, not just for me, but for the broader defense team. And when I travel across the country to bases from Esquimalt to Edmonton to Borden to Shearwater to Valcartier, I see that there is a willingness in the Canadian Armed Forces leadership and beyond to ensure that we have the cultural change necessary to ensure that our Canadian Armed Forces can assist with forest fires and floods here at home, but as well as international operations, as we are seeing on NATO's eastern flank and in training Ukrainian soldiers. This is of the utmost importance to all of us. And on this Remembrance Day, I'd like to thank our Canadian Armed Forces for their work, tireless work in making sure that our country remains safe while making sure that we're growing an institution where everyone feels safe, protected, and respected.
Okay, Minister Anand, thanks for joining me on a busy day. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, David. Take good care.